The day they bulldozed my great-grandfather's bridge was the day I decided to turn their $4 million lakefront resort into a muddy parking lot. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'm sipping coffee on my dock when I hear the rumble of diesel engines. Through the morning mist, I see a bulldozer rolling toward the stone bridge my great-grandfather built with his own hands in 1923. The same bridge that connected our community for 100 years. The bridge that some power-hungry HOA president decided was an eyesore. But here's what Linda Prescott and her fancy AA board didn't know about water rights in Texas. My great-grandfather didn't just build that bridge, he controlled the dam. And I just inherited something more powerful than any HOA bylaw, the legal right to drain their entire lake. Drop a comment. What would you do if someone destroyed your family's legacy? And where are you watching from? I want to see how many of you have dealt with these HOA tyrants. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a civil engineer, and 3 months ago I inherited the most beautiful piece of lakefront property you've ever seen. My great-grandfather Samuel Morrison built our family cabin back in 1920, right after he got back from the Great War. But the real masterpiece was the bridge. Sam didn't just slap together some planks and call it good. This man hand-cut limestone blocks from the local quarry and built a proper stone arch bridge that connected our side of the lake to the main road. For 100 years, that bridge served everyone. Fishermen heading to their favorite spots, kids walking to swimming holes, neighbors helping neighbors. It was the heart of our little community. When I inherited the place, my wife Sarah and I had dreams. We'd been saving every penny, planning to retire there in a few years. I'd fix up the cabin, maybe do some consulting work from home, spend my mornings fishing off that old wooden dock. The creak of those weathered planks under my boots was like a lullaby. Then Linda Prescott happened. Linda's the kind of woman who wears pearls to the grocery store and drives a spotless white BMW that's never seen a dirt road. She moved into the Whispering Pines luxury community 2 years ago. That's the fancy development that sprouted up on the other side of the lake like mushrooms after rain. Within 6 months, she'd maneuvered herself into the HOA presidency. I should have seen trouble coming when I got that first certified letter. The envelope had that official weight to it. You know, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. Inside was Linda's sweetest pie letterhead declaring that my bridge violated community architectural standards and had to go. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. My bridge was built when her development was still cow pasture, but Linda had done her homework, or thought she had. The letter cited HOA Covenant Number 47 Billions, architectural review requirements, and threatened me with $500 a day in fines if I didn't remove the bridge within 30 days. That's when I started digging through boxes in my grandfather's attic, musty old papers that smelled like dust and time, but legal documents nonetheless. I found the original survey maps, the deed records, and most importantly, the grandfathering clause that specifically protected existing structures. My bridge was literally older than the HOA by 8 DEC. Armed with my paperwork, I showed up to the next HOA meeting in the community center. You know, that particular smell of institutional buildings, floor wax and stale coffee, and the faint scent of disappointment. That was my introduction to HOA politics. I spread my documents across the folding table like I was playing a winning poker hand. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Linda barely glanced at my papers. Her response still makes my blood boil. "Times change, Mr. Morrison. Progress requires sacrifice." She said it with this condescending smile, like she was explaining basic math to a child. The board vote was a foregone conclusion, 5-2 in favor of enforcement. Linda's allies, all recent arrivals with more money than sense, outnumbered the old-timers who actually remembered what community meant. Walking back to my truck after that meeting, the gravel crunching under my feet, I realized something important. This wasn't about architectural standards or community vision. This was about power. Linda saw my humble bridge, my working gas cabin, my beat-up pickup truck, and decided I didn't fit her vision of an upscale neighborhood. She wanted me gone. Sarah tried to stay optimistic. "We'll fight this together," she said over dinner, squeezing my hand across our little kitchen table. "You've got the law on your side." I nodded and smiled, but privately I was wondering if being right would be enough. What I didn't know yet was that Linda had picked a fight with the wrong engineer. See, I didn't just know about building codes and property law. I knew about water. Linda didn't waste time moving from threats to action. 3 days after that board meeting, I'm heading out to work when I spot 2 guys in matching polo shirts standing near my property line. Security guards at 7 in the morning on a Wednesday. "Morning, gentlemen," I called out, coffee mug in hand. "Y'all lost?" The older one, built like a retired linebacker, pulled out a clipboard. "HOA Compliance Patrol, sir. We're documenting violations." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Violations like what?" "Grass exceeds HOA standard of 3 in multiple areas. Dock requires repainting per aesthetic guidelines. Storage shed needs pressure washing." He was reading this stuff like a grocery list. Over the next 2 weeks, these clowns wrote me up for everything short of breathing too loud. My mailbox was apparently the wrong shade of black. My welcome mat was non-compliant sizing. They even cited me for having a fishing net visible from the road. By week 3, I was staring at $1,200 in fines. That's when I did what any good engineer does when faced with a problem. I investigated the system. Turns out Linda's husband, Rick, owns Prescott Security Solutions. Cute, right? The HOA was paying her husband's company $3,000 a month to harass homeowners into compliance. I spent an evening on the state contractor licensing website and discovered something interesting. Rick's security license had expired 6 months ago. He'd been operating illegally this entire time. Here's a knowledge nugget for you. In Texas, HOA security must be licensed just like any private security firm, and most aren't. Always check their credentials before letting them cite you for violations. But I wasn't done digging. I called in a favor from a buddy who does commercial inspections. We took a little walk around Linda's pristine property one Saturday morning. Her deck extension, no permits. Her pool house built 6 in over the setback line. That fancy Japanese garden she was so proud of. According to the original survey I'd found, it was 3 feet onto my property. Linda had been trespassing for 3 years. The next Monday, I filed complaints with the state licensing board about Rick's security company and requested a full survey of the property line. I didn't make a big show of it, just handled it like any other engineering problem. Document everything. Follow proper procedures. Let the facts speak for themselves. Linda's response was predictable. Within a week, I started hearing whispers at the hardware store. "Jake Morrison's been diff. I cult to work with. He's lowering property values with that ugly bridge. Some people just don't understand progress." Sarah came home from the grocery store one Thursday looking frustrated. "The cashier barely made eye contact," she said, "and Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop acted like I had the plague." That's when the anonymous complaints started rolling in. Someone called the county claiming my bridge was structurally unsafe. Another tipster reported that I was dumping chemicals in the lake, which was hilarious since I'm an environmental engineer who tests water quality for a living. But here's where Linda made her first real mistake. While she was busy playing neighborhood politician, I was doing what I do best, reading technical documents. I'd submitted a public records request for anything related to water rights and dam operations around our lake. What I found in those musty county files made me sit up straight in my kitchen chair. There were maps I'd never seen before, showing water flow patterns from the 1920s, engineering reports from my great-grandfather's era, and most interesting of all, documentation of something called secondary water rights that had never been transferred to the HOA. I spent that weekend walking around the lake with a surveyor's eye, really looking at how the water moved. The resort that Linda kept bragging about, the one that was supposed to bring class to our community, had a serious vulnerability. Their entire operation depended on consistent water levels. Their boat docks, their lakefront dining, their million-dollar water features, all of it assumed the lake would stay exactly where it was. The smell of diesel fuel still hung in the air from their construction equipment, and I could taste the irony. Linda was so focused on my little stone bridge that she'd never bothered to understand the bigger picture. I drove home that evening with a new understanding of my situation. Linda thought she was playing chess, moving her HOA pieces around the board to force me out, but she didn't realize I wasn't just another homeowner she could bully. I was the guy who understood how the water worked. Linda's next move came with the subtlety of a freight train. I'm sitting in my home office one Tuesday morning when I hear trucks pulling up outside. Not just one truck, 3 county vehicles and a man in a hard hat carrying the kind of clipboard that ruins your day. Jake Morrison. The inspector looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Anonymous tip about structural concerns with your bridge. I'm here to conduct a safety evaluation. Anonymous tip. Right. I could practically smell Linda's expensive perfume lingering in the morning air. The inspection took 4 hours. This poor guy crawled over every inch of my great-grandfather's stonework with calipers and moisture meters. When he finished, he had the decency to look embarrassed. Mr. Morrison, your bridge is solid as the day it was built. But he consulted his clipboard. Current code requires seismic reinforcement for structures this size. Estimated cost for compliance is $3,000. You've got 10 days to submit improvement plans or we'll have to condemn it. $3,000 for earthquake protection in Texas, where the biggest seismic event in living memory was when they blasted rock for the new highway. But here's where Linda got clever. The inspector handed me a business card along with the citation. Prescott Construction can handle the work. Rick Prescott gave me a quote for $12,000. Says he can have it done in a week. I stared at that business card like it was a snake. Rick Prescott, Linda's husband, volunteering to fix the problem his wife had created for 12 grand. What a coincidence. That evening, I made some phone calls, started with the state contractor licensing board where a very helpful woman named Maria pulled up Rick's file. Sir, Mr. Prescott's contractor license expired 24 months ago. He's not legally authorized to perform construction work for hire. Next call was to my buddy at the county building department. Jake, that's seismic requirement. It only applies to new construction and major renovations. Existing structures are grandfathered unless they're actually unsafe. Here's your second knowledge nugget. Water rights in the American West often predate modern property law. They can trump HOA rules, zoning ordinances, and sometimes even eminent domain. Armed with this information, I decided to dig deeper into those water rights documents. What I found in the county archives made my hands shake. My great-grandfather hadn't just built a bridge and a cabin. He'd held secondary water rights to the entire lake system granted back when this was still ranch country. Those rights included something called Flow Management Authority. In plain English, I could legally control how much water stayed in the lake. I spent the next 2 days studying engineering reports from the 1922nd dam construction. Fascinating stuff, really. The original designers built bypass channels that could redirect water around the main dam. My great-grandfather's bridge wasn't just transportation. It was positioned to control a secondary spillway system. Meanwhile, Linda was busy playing her reputation game. She'd somehow convinced 3 of my neighbors that I was unstable and potentially dangerous. I came home one evening to find new security cameras pointed directly at my property from 2 different houses. Sarah noticed at first. Honey, Mrs. Rodriguez won't even wave anymore. And Tom at the marina acted like I was carrying the plague when I stopped for bait. The breaking point came when Linda filed for a restraining order, claimed I'd made threatening statements about he dam and posed a clear and present danger to community safety. The judge took one look at her evidence, which consisted entirely of my public records requests and my questions at HOA meetings, and tossed it out. But the damage was done. Half the neighborhood now thought I was some kind of unhinged domestic terrorist. That's when I made a discovery that changed everything. I was reviewing the resort's environmental impact study when I noticed something in the fine print. Their bank loan had very specific requirements about water levels. If the lake dropped below a certain depth, their entire $4 million loan would become immediately due. The resort's grand opening was 3 months away. Deposits had been collected for weddings, corporate retreats, fishing tournaments. Linda's family had invested $500,000 of their own money in the project. I sat in my kitchen that night staring at those loan documents and realized something profound. Linda thought she was fighting a battle about HOA rules and property aesthetics, but she'd picked a fight with someone who understood the one thing her entire development depended on. Otter doesn't care about HOA bylaws. It flows according to physics and legal precedent, and I was beginning to understand that I held more power than any HOA president ever could. The metallic taste of stress had been my constant companion for weeks, but that night it was replaced by something else entirely, the taste of possibility. Linda's patience finally snapped the week before Thanksgiving. I'm checking my mailbox when I see her marching across the street in those ridiculous white heels, clutching another manila envelope like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Mr. Morrison," her voice could have cut glass, "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. Your bridge represents an immediate safety crisis that cannot wait for normal procedures." She thrust the envelope at me with enough force to give me a paper cut. Inside was a notice for a crisis intervention meeting scheduled for the next evening. The agenda was simple: vote to authorize immediate bridge removal with or without my consent. The meeting was a circus. Linda had imported her golf partner from Dallas, some guy claiming to be a structural engineer who'd never actually seen my bridge, but was happy to declare it a death trap. His presentation included phrases like catastrophic failure risk and imminent public danger, real professional stuff. The vote was swift and merciless, 7-tone in favor of immediate removal. The lone dissent came from Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old woman who'd lived here since the 960. Everyone else had either been bought, intimidated, or convinced that I was some kind of bridge-building madman. "Contractor will begin tomorrow morning," Linda announced with barely concealed glee. "Removal fees of $15,000 will be added to Mr. Morrison's account. If payment is not received within 30 days, a lien will be placed on the property." $15,000 to destroy something my great-grandfather built with his own hands. I drove home in a fog, the rough texture of my steering wheel the only thing keeping me grounded. Sarah took one look at my face and poured 2 glasses of wine without saying a word. That night, I did something I'd never done before in my engineering career. I filed an emergency injunction in county court. Not because I was confident it would work, but because I was out of other options. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning exactly, when Linda's contractor was supposed to start demolition. I walked into that courthouse at 8:30, carrying a banker's box full of documents, water rights records, contractor licensing violations, evidence of HOA fund misuse, and structural reports proving my bridge was safer than most county roads. Judge Martinez listened for exactly 12 minutes before making his decision. Emergency injunction granted. 30-day temporary restraining order issued. "Mr. Morrison, you have 1 month to resolve this matter through proper legal channels." I called Linda from the courthouse parking lot. "Demolition's canceled," I said. "You might want to tell your contractor." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Then this is war, Mr. Morrison. I hope you understand that. Mike, here's knowledge nugget number 3. Emergency injunctions can halt HOA actions if you can demonstrate immediate irreversible harm, but you need documented evidence, not just angry feelings." That afternoon I discovered something that made Linda's declaration of war feel almost quaint. I was reviewing HOA financial records, which are public documents by the way, when I noticed some interesting discrepancies. Over the past year, Linda had authorized $30,000 in legal consultations and emergency contractor services. Every single payment went to companies owned by her husband or her brother-in-law. I spent the weekend playing forensic accountant, cross-referencing every payment with business licenses and corporate filings. Linda hadn't just been using HOA funds to harass me. She'd been treating the community treasury like her personal piggy bank. But the real revelation came when I found the Lakes' original engineering survey from 1923. My great-grandfather hadn't just built a bridge. He'd positioned it as a control structure for what the old documents called secondary flow management. The bridge wasn't just crossing the water. It was part of a larger water control system that included the main dam. I spent hours studying those faded blueprints, the musty smell of old paper filling my kitchen as I traced water flow patterns with my finger. The more I understood about the original design, the more I realized Linda had mad opers who thought money could override century-old law. My bridge is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Every morning I walk across those limestone blocks my great-grandfather laid with his own hands. And I can almost hear him chuckling about how his water management system saved the day. The resort thrives. The community is stronger than ever. And our little lake has become a model for how development and history can coexist when people choose cooperation over domination. Linda's story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked HOA power. Last month, the state legislature passed the Morrison Act, requiring all HOA boards to respect pre-existing water rights and historic structures. Small victories, but they add up. Sarah and I are expecting our first child next spring. They'll grow up running across that old stone bridge, learning to fish from the same dock where I learned from my grandfather. Some legacies are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. The best part, our new neighbors actually like having us around. We've become the go-to family for community barbecues, and I've helped 3 different homeowners navigate their own HOA disputes without anyone having to drain any lakes. But if you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember this: knowledge is power, history matters. And sometimes the best weapon against bureaucratic bullying is understanding the law better than the bullies do. Drop a comment with your own HOA horror story. I read every one, and I've got ideas for dealing with these petty tyrants. And if you want to hear about the corrupt city council that tried to steal an elderly farmer's land through eminent domain and how century-old mineral rights saved her farm, hit that subscribe button. That's a story for next time. The sound of children's laughter echoes off the old stone bridge, now mixed wit. The gentle lap of water that knows exactly where it belongs. Friday morning brought the kind of chaos that makes you question reality. I'm drinking coffee on my porch when 3 sheriff's deputies pull up, followed by Linda in her pristine BMW and 2 guys in expensive suits who screamed federal lawyers. Jake Morrison, the lead deputy, looked apologetic. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of criminal threatening and conspiracy to commit environmental terrorism." Environmental terrorism for exercising legal water rights my family had held for a century. Patricia had warned me this might happen. Within 2 hours, I was bonded out and sitting in her Austin office while she worked her magic with federal authorities. Turns out, Linda's Blackstone lawyers had convinced a federal judge that my water rights posed an imminent threat to interstate commerce and environmental stability. The restraining order was comprehensive. I couldn't approach the dam, couldn't operate any water controls, couldn't even discuss water management in public. Linda had essentially used the federal court system to neutralize my only leverage. But Patricia smiled when she read the full order. "Jake, they just made a huge mistake. This restraining order acknowledges your water rights exist. They're just temporarily restricting them. That's federal recognition of your claim." Within 6 hours, Patricia had filed her own federal lawsuit asserting water rights violation under the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899. More importantly, she'd obtained a counter-injunction that superseded the local restraining order. "Federal water rights trump local criminal complaints every time," she explained. Linda's lawyers gave us exactly the precedent we needed. Here's a crucial knowledge nugget. Federal water rights enforcement can override local law enforcement actions when historical claims predate state and local jurisdiction. But Linda wasn't done with her scorched earth campaign. That afternoon, I discovered she'd hired a private security firm to patrol the dam area 24 hours a day. Not just any security firm, ex-military contractors who looked like they'd stepped out of an action movie. Sarah came home from the grocery store with news that made my stomach drop. "Honey, there are news trucks at the end of our street," and Mrs. Patterson said, "Linda's been telling people you're planning to poison the water supply." Poison the water supply. Linda had officially jumped from harassment into full-blown character assassination. The media circus exploded over the weekend. Local TV stations ran stories about domestic EO terrorism and water rights extremism. Linda appeared on 3 different news programs playing the role of concerned community leader, protecting innocent families from a deranged individual with dangerous expertise. But the media attention worked both ways. By Sunday, property rights organizations from across Texas were calling to offer support. Environmental lawyers were volunteering their services. Even some resort employees were quietly reaching out to say they supported my position. The community was splitting down the middle. Long-time residents who remembered my great-grandfather rallied around my family's history. Newer residents, terrified their property values would tank, sided with Linda's development vision. Monday brought the nuclear option Linda had been building toward. The HOA board called an emergency community protection meeting to authorize any and all measures necessary to prevent me from accessing the dam. They'd essentially voted to hire armed guards to stop me from exercising federally protected water rights. That's when Frank Wilson made a decision that changed everything. He called me at 6 in the morning with an offer that made my hands shake. "Jake, I've been operating this dam for 30 years. Never seen such a mess over something so simple. I'm retiring effective immediately, and I'm recommending you as interim dam operator under your water rights authority. Interim dam operator with federal water rights and official operational authority." Linda's private security couldn't legally stop me from doing routine maintenance, including testing the secondary flow channels. The final piece fell into place when Tom Rodriguez called with information that would destroy Linda's credibility forever. He'd been wearing a wire during his conversations with the sheriff's department, documenting Linda's attempted bribery. "Jake, she offered me $15,000 yesterday. Said if I could make it look like you sabotaged the controls yourself, she'd make sure I got a promotion and a raise. I've got it all recorded. $15,000 for false testimony." Linda had crossed from civil disputes into federal felony territory. That evening, I sat with Sarah on our dock, listening to the gentle lap of water against the pilings. The smell of approaching rain hung heavy in the air, and I could taste the electricity of the coming storm.